we're all very, very proud of you and for you. But I want you to tell us, if you will, a little bit about your background. I met you the first time, I think it was a year and a half ago when Rick Scott brought you to Florida. And I thought it was just an incredible summary of the life you had before you were a Congresswoman.
Absolutely. So I ran for office in 2014 and I flipped a district from Democrat to Republican. But my personal story goes back a long time before that. I grew up in upstate New York. I did not come from a political family. I came from a very civic minded family. My parents own a small business. And I think when you grow up in a small business family, you understand the importance of work ethic. You understand the challenges of creating jobs in today's economy, particularly in states like New York, where it's very difficult. I was the first member of my immediate family to graduate from college. I graduated from Harvard, but I remembered my values and I was one of the few conservative voices on campus. I then served under President George W. Bush with you, actually. I served on the Domestic Policy Council and in the office of the Chief of Staff, and then worked in various political campaigns and think tanks. And I decided to go back home, started working at my family business again, and started the long process of running for office. And I was 28 years old at the time, Nancy, and a lot of people didn't think I could win, let alone win a primary and general election by a historic margin and flip a district.
That's absolutely incredible. Some of those people may have thought you wouldn't win, but I thought the moment you said your first few statements at that meeting, you were going to win. And how did you get the buy-in from fellow Republicans that more female candidates really were needed to be a priority?
Well, I made a public call to action, and I was very proud that Leader Kevin McCarthy and the Republican whip Steve Scalise were two of the first people that backed me up, that said, this is a mission worth investing in, and we need to do better. They have been with us every step of the way, and so have been all of my female colleagues and many of my male colleagues. This was a team effort, and we didn't just endorse every Republican woman candidate, Nancy. We worked very, very hard to find truly the strongest candidates who happen to be Republican women. We helped them with fundraising. We helped them raise their profile. We bundled small dollar donations. And it's so exciting to see these incredible women add many cracks to the glass ceiling.
What were the obstacles that potential female candidates face that their male counterparts didn't need to address?
Well, it's interesting. On the Democratic side, there has been a long-term ecosystem, whether it's Emily's List or various organizations who are focused on supporting Republican women before their primaries. We don't have that on the Republican side, and we don't play identity politics. We look for the best and brightest candidates, which I agree with focusing on the best and brightest candidates, but we do need to provide strong Republican women candidate with pre-primary support. And what I did was I set out a number of metrics that candidates would have to meet. They would have to demonstrate that they could raise a certain amount of funds on their own, build a strong grassroots campaign, have a strategy to win, have a strong campaign budget, and have an understanding of the data and who those voters are they need to turn out to the polls. That helped us really winnow the top candidates and endorse them early on. But this infrastructure hasn't been as robust on the Republican side. But what's exciting is the success of 2020 means that there is a lot more focus on this. We're going to increase our numbers going into 2022.
And another area that I think that you're just going to open up, and it can't be too soon, but it's really an issue that I have resented for so long, and that is so many glossy magazines and newspapers, we all could say the names all day long, rarely print stories of successful and very good leaders in the Republican Party who are women. You just don't see it every day. You see a lot of stories on the other side, but you don't see the successful Republican stories of these women.
You are spot on, Nancy, and I actually tweeted, I will keep waiting for those amazing magazine covers. We remember the Rolling Stone cover, the Vanity Fair cover, Vogue magazine of Democratic women. And these Republican women who were elected are extraordinary leaders. You have the first two Korean American women who flipped districts in California, Young Kim and Michelle Steele. You have a Cherokee American woman, Yvette Harrell, who won a district in New Mexico. You have the first Iranian-American woman, Stephanie Bice, who won a seat in Oklahoma. These are amazing, amazing stories. You have the first female graduate of the Citadel in South Carolina, Nancy Mace, who's going to be sworn into office in January. They deserve the coverage in the glossy magazines. Unfortunately, we know how biased the mainstream media is, and it's been a frustration of mine because I think they're missing tens of millions of readers across the country in the fact that they are only covering one side of the aisle when it comes to highlighting women's achievements.
This is so true. And when we return, we will have more time and hear more from our Congresswoman, Elise Stefanik. We're back speaking with New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Now, we've heard people calling the new women of the GOP the antidote to the far left-leaning agenda of the squad. How important are their voices?
Their voices are incredibly important. So first of all, the far left progressives, the squad made up of AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley, that is not representative of the viewpoints of so many millions of American women across the country. The Democratic Party and the far left do not have a monopoly on women voters in this country. In fact, they are out of touch with the majority of women voters in this country. I think it's important that Republicans really put forth these strong, newly elected women at the forefront so we can help fight back against the squad. The other thing that's really interesting about some of these newly elected members, not just women, is many of them come from families from behind the Iron Curtain. So families that have experienced communism and socialism and are standing up for our values of America, of the free market, of capitalism, of equal opportunity for all. You have leaders like Nicole Malliotakis, who one of her parents is Cuban American, Maria Elvira Salazar in Florida, whose family fled Cuba under Castro. So these voices are important. You have Victoria Sparks from Indiana, who is from Ukraine and immigrated to the United States and has been a strong voice standing up against socialist policies.
And you know, because you've worked so hard and others for the 117th Congress to be diverse, could it also create a level of divisiveness?
Well, absolutely. These are big fights, and America is worth fighting for. We need to stand up for principles that make our country great. We need to stand up for the American people and fight back against socialism. And I often think some of our toughest fighters are our women members. It is tough running for office. And as we know, the media criticizes conservative women very differently than they criticize liberal women who would never really get criticized by the mainstream media. But yet conservative women take that day in and day out. So our strongest fighters standing up for our values, for the Constitution, are going to be all of our colleagues, but particularly these amazing Republican women.
And you know, you really did a great service talking about socialism. And I absolutely agree with you, having served overseas in a formerly communist country, that the fear is real to people. And particularly when people feel some of our freedoms are going to be taken away or an agenda is going to be presented that will be forced down people's throats. These are really important issues that you've discussed and opened up.
Absolutely. And again, when some of these women whose families are from behind the Iron Curtain, they can speak to it from a very personal perspective. I mean, when you listen to the stories of some of their families that came to the United States with $5 in their pocket and have built successful businesses, have really understood that this is the greatest country in the world. And they've seen countries like Ukraine that shifted towards socialism under the Iron Curtain of the then Soviet Union. They speak from a very personal and a very compelling way as to why we need to really protect our values.
Well, the women who have supported you in this Congress and others going forward are so much in favor of the sorts of things that you stand for, Elise Stefanik. And now we're very interested to hear about what's next on your agenda.
We have a lot of work in front of us. At front of the mind is making sure that we have a strong economic recovery as we continue to work to beat COVID. So that means support for our small businesses. That means continuing to fund Operation Warp Speed, which will be the fastest distribution of a vaccine in human history, and really a testament to President Trump's leadership working with members of Congress. Moving forward, we need to win back the House for Republicans and fire Nancy Pelosi. And the way to do that is supporting candidates that can win back these districts. If you look at the 2020 election cycle and seats that flipped, that Republicans won back, every single Republican candidate was either a woman, a veteran, or a minority. This is a model that works, and it's a model that's going to work in 2022. And I'm already hearing from dozens of women candidates who are considering running in 2022 in districts where Democrats barely hold on. And we are going to have a historic opportunity to win back the majority and fire Nancy Pelosi once and for all.
More with Elise Stefanik when we return. This past week, more House Republicans joined the long list of congressional lawmakers supporting a lawsuit to overturn the election results. You're one of them. Not everyone from the GOP is supporting this lawsuit. Republican Senator Alexander is one of them. Take a look.
I mean, the states have counted, certified their votes. The courts have resolved the disputes. It looks very much like the electors will vote for Joe Biden.
I signed on to the amicus brief to stand up for the Constitution, to make sure that we have election integrity and election security. If you look at the outcomes in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin, there are very concerns that there was overreach at the governor's and secretary of state level. By the Constitution, state legislatures are supposed to set the election rules. You're not supposed to be able to arbitrarily change whether it's the signature verification check or whether it's the process of how elections are conducted in your state. State legislatures are closest to the people, and they are constitutionally responsible for setting how elections are conducted. So this lawsuit was not about overturning the election. It was about standing up for the Constitution and protecting the election integrity and election security. And moving forward, this will be a priority for me and my fellow Republicans, is making sure that we have strong policies to protect our election integrity and election security so that we do not have half of the American people really doubting the outcome of the election. So this is foremost about the Constitution. Even in New York State, we saw a governor who overreached and arbitrarily changed the rules this year and utilized COVID as the excuse. And while COVID was unprecedented, the Constitution is the most important guidepost. It is the North Star for the United States of America. So my joining the amicus brief is about supporting the Constitution.
Should President Trump concede, or does the Trump team have enough to go on?
Well, I've always said that the president should play out all legal options, and they have done so. There's been a number of lawsuits that have been filed, not just at the federal level, but at the state level as well. And the president has said that he will respect the outcome of the Electoral College and will ensure a smooth transition. There are still state lawsuits that are pending. We have to see how those turn out. But the president does effectively shine a light on real questions about this election integrity in terms of, again, the unconstitutionality in terms of the executive actions taken either by bureaucrats, by boards of elections, by secretaries of state, or governors who didn't work with the state legislatures to update, and the state legislatures didn't pass those changes to the election law. Look at the state of Georgia. The fact that the signature check wasn't implemented as was required by law, by state law. So we need to clean up these elections, make sure that we have secure elections in the future.
Congresswoman, New York Governor Cuomo was mocked online for announcing a virtual birthday party for himself to raise funds, given that so many are not even making ends meet. What are your thoughts?
Governor Cuomo is the worst governor in America. I have been a critic very publicly of how poorly he has led our state during COVID, but really his entire time in office. We are a state, unfortunately, that has lost an extraordinarily high number of people who have left New York and they're moving to business-friendly states like Florida Texas, and other places in the country, he also has prioritized himself over the people of New York. He also, obviously, the nursing home scandal, which is really a tragedy. I've talked to many families who have lost loved ones in nursing homes. So for him to celebrate this, it's the same as him receiving an Emmy, which is so out of touch with everyday New Yorkers. He should not be celebrating with this virtual birthday party, when New Yorkers are suffering not just from COVID, but from his really onerous and not science-based decisions like shutting down indoor dining in New York City, when less than 2% of COVID transmission actually comes from indoor dining. So he's done a very poor job, and he has earned the title of the worst governor in America.
So, knowing that there may be a possibility of further lockdowns and all that you've told us, how will we be able to bring back New York?
Well, we need to stand up. We need to make sure that small businesses have the support they need. We need bipartisan voices to speak out against these fiats and these executive actions by the governor. Earlier this year, the governor had unilateral executive authority to make these changes. They did not go through the state legislature. I believe the state assembly and the state senate in New York are closest to the people, and any type of changes of that magnitude need to be held accountable to the people and go through state legislatures. So we need to claw back that executive authority that was granted to the governor. In addition, we need to have an investigation into his nursing homes. I have publicly called for that. The Department of Justice needs to conduct that investigation to provide answers to families who have been ignored by the governor. But small businesses will continue speaking out. And this governor has talked about, he'll say false statements like New York has received no support. There is not a single state in the country that has received more federal support than New York State, whether it was the $9 billion in the initial CARES package, whether it was the billions of dollars sent to New York hospitals, the Javits Center built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or the U.S. Navy Comfort Ship. In addition, as the vaccine is being rolled out, New York obviously was the first state to have the vaccine distributed to. So the feds have stepped up in big ways, and I've been proud to provide those results and provide what has been needed in New York State. And the governor, while Hollywood may like him, while he may have ran his victory lap about his Emmy and published his book to make money off of, everyday New Yorkers are very, very frustrated with his fundamental lack of leadership.
What do we need to understand about the vaccine and the rollout, though, in New York, as you really are in a place to understand it better than anybody?
Well, first of all, Operation Warp Speed is a historic achievement. And a lot of the credit goes to President Trump, who really brought a whole of government approach and the private sector. Congress stepped up, and I was proud to be an advocate for this, providing billions of funds to make sure that we had the resources we need to effectively lead to the fastest vaccine in human history. Now, I want to be clear here. There were no shortcuts taken on the medical or scientific side. What we really tried to address was the onerous administrative red tape. We made sure that the FDA approval process was fast-tracked, but making sure that all the science-based and medical-based expertise, that was all conducted properly. What we need to know in New York State is it is prioritizing healthcare workers. I fought to make sure that emergency medical services workers, EMS frontline workers, were also prioritized, as well as those in nursing homes. What is shameful to me is that Governor Cuomo has really brought doubt on the vaccine earlier this summer with his comments. We don't need that from our leaders. We need to trust the FDA and really make sure that from the Cuomo's perspective, he should not have been putting out that misinformation. And I am so proud that we've been able to deliver this result and prioritize New Yorkers despite what the governor has said.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, for joining us today.